Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy, ordained queerdo with a fascination for everything symbolism, cycles, and patterns.
And I am Moonkittee, a queer femme poly kitchen witch and a proud geek. Today's topic is queer rites of passage.
Yay! Rites of passage.
Yes. So, Damona, what do you mean when we say queer rites of passage? Or what do you think when we say queer rites of passage?
Okay. Rites of passage.
Mm-hmm.
Just define that
first
and foremost, and then we'll get to the queer part. But a rite of passage is kind of a ceremony or an event that marks an important stage in someone's life, especially with big life event type things such as birth, puberty, marriage, and death.
The big boys.
Right. And there are so many different spiritual traditions, obviously so many different spiritual paths and traditions in the world, not just in the pagan world,
right,
but in the overall overculture as well.
Mundane world.
And all the big cultural norms of the religions. And there are a lot of like rituals and ceremonies that you would probably be familiar with that I would consider as a rite of passage.
Okay.
For example, I'm sure you've heard of like bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs.
Yes.
That is a rite of passage, I believe, for the Jewish culture of into adulthood. Quinceañeras. So again, not my culture, but I have always definitely as a kid 100% wished that I could have a quinceañera just for the dress. Yeah. The Sweet 16. But there's other like baptisms. That's a rite of passage for some families' spiritual traditions in birth, like around birth, or sometimes it's done as a rite of passage into adulthood or
initiation into a faith.
Exactly.
Milestones, different points and things.
So I'd love to oh, go ahead.
I would say so things that sometimes they're not going to be universal across everyone. They'll be tied to cultures, but again, moments in time and areas that transcend you from one level to another. Is that fair?
So yeah, well, so here's the thing. Think about like brain development, right? It's a gradual thing,
right?
Even into our age and beyond, because as it's a right. So sometimes at some point we've reached peak brain development function, and it's all downhill from there. But anyway, for some people at least, maybe not for all. But I think it matters to our psyche, to our spirit, to our brain to recognize the growth, the development, the changes that we experience throughout life, and marking it with a special occasion can be very meaningful and memorable. Like, for example, I don't always remember all of high school, but I definitely remember like going to the prom sort of thing. It's not going to be everybody's experience, but it's the special occasions kind of matter, particularly in hindsight. And we're definitely getting that rain now. It is like woo out there.
Yeah, you've gotten very dark.
yeah.
But your nose stripe and your heart is just glowing so bright right now. It's very cute. But yeah, it's like so again, for those of you who are watching this on the YouTube, the rain has hit Damona. We're again in January, February area. It's rainy, it's wet.
Oh, sorry for my ethereal glow, but
yes, Damona is sneakily glowing right now.
Yay! I think it's really important for our mental development, our growth, our spiritual development, to be able to mark these big life growth transitions.
Absolutely.
In some way or another. Yeah. So culturally and spiritually, a lot of people already do these things. They don't even realize it. Or, sometimes we don't get these things and then we feel we didn't realize we missed out on something. And there are ways to, rectify that. Like maybe give your inner teenager the party that they never had. The birthday party they never had. Right. A birthday party could be a rite of passage.
When we're talking about rites of passage, again, we kind of got the feel of what it is. And I love the fact that they aren't just faith-based. they're also secular. So again, it's your birthdays, your anniversaries, things that mark a specific kind of thing. And there's a scope to rites of passage as well. I guess if we're talking about I guess maybe it's a scope to celebrations that celebrate rites of passage, because we have
they're the memory makers.
Yeah, we have we have big ones as we have little ones. We may celebrate our birthday every year, but we're going to celebrate our 21st birthday or our 18th birthday more than in a different way than we would say our 8th.
100%. So unless it's your golden birthday, which is a whole other thing, because my kid was born on the 8th day of the month that he was born in, and when he turned 8, it was his golden birthday.
Right.
The golden birthday is that you basically turn the age that the day that you were born is. So like for me, I was born on the 30th of the month that I was born in, and so when I turned 30, that was my golden birthday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I was the 6th, and I was 6, so I would not have remembered. Right.
See,
so never heard that term before. Actually,
see, and now one of these days we're gonna have a golden birthday for your inner 6-year-old. I'm just saying, we're gonna have to do it. Yeah. So there's these major, kind of major life events, and then there's all kind of things that kind of I think go into that category. So the right to birth. So rites of passage to birth, baby showers, pregnant mama blessings, just kind of, or any kind of rituals that are tied into welcoming new life, and is a right to birth. Baptisms often happen sometimes for some cultures at that point. And then I think birthday parties, like I think we have a right to celebrate, like, hey, this is the day that my ass greeted this world. And I'm happy I'm here, and I want all the people that are happy that I'm alive and was born on this day to do something fun with me, because hey, we deserve to be celebrated. So I think that those are some important birth, and then the next after birth would be like the right to adulthood or puberty.
Okay.
Which I think is really fascinating, because I was recently listening to a dark history podcast on YouTube, and she was talking about Little Red Riding Hood and all of the different iterations of that story. But the one thing that was always in common of the different iterations is the red garment that she wears, the red hood. Do you know what that symbolizes?
Menstrual cycles?
Motherfucking puberty. I was pissed. We wove it into our culture years and years ago. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Symbology.
Yep, exactly. Some AFAB people had a menses party to celebration as a rite of passage, like a coming of age of when you do reach that point in puberty. Not all, but some. A right to adulthood, like you were saying, can happen at different ages. So I feel like people who like to gamble are always looking for or drink. They're looking forward to that, or go to clubs, bars, or whatever, drag shows. That 21st birthday is a big one for the US, because that's when you can show your ID and get into all these places that have been barred to you prior legally. So that's kind of a rite of passage. And then graduation. Different graduations, whether it's from, those are rites of passage, right? You're marking moving up to higher education, or moving on to put your education to use. So graduations are often rites of passage. Memory makers, right? Those moments of time where you stopped and you said, I completed this thing, and now I'm going on to this thing.
The next step.
That's very often happens. I also think it's very interesting. We kind of talked about the returns that happen when we did our astrology episode with Ken. The Saturn returns gets talked about more often in pop culture, which I'm glad, because a lot of people go through a huge shift at that age between 27 and 30, early 30s. And I kind of feel like that's also a rite of passage into our second destiny, or, real maturing into adulthood, as opposed to dipping your toes into adulthood that happens in your early 20s.
You think you're an adult in your early 20s, and you realize you're really not.
Well, I just say the older I get, the
Yes.
younger 20 seems.
Yes.
But,
Agreed.
it's all about perspective. All of this stuff can
Hmm.
really be down to perspective. So then we have the right to marriage
Hmm.
or partnership. And that can be like, I think not just like weddings or commitment ceremonies,
Hmm.
but it can also be like business, starting a business or a business
Hmm.
partnership or collaborations.
Hmm.
But I feel like sometimes we have a way to partake in a ritual or a ceremony that
Hmm.
marks that kind of, now I am committed to this other thing in my life and not just,
Hmm.
me. The right to eldership, which I kind of think is like pre funeral, but like retirement,
Hmm.
changing career paths like a lot of people do later in life, or maybe they go back to school to learn something that they always wanted to learn, pick
Hmm.
up a new craft, right?
Hmm.
We were talking about that.
Step into that wise old elder role.
Legacy building. So
Hmm.
so for long you've learned all these things. What can you pass down to the next generation? What
Hmm.
wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, do you want to help people possess without the hard-earned part?
Hmm.
What are you going to pass down? Legacy building. So
Hmm.
that's the right to like eldership. And then there's the right to ancestorship. And
Okay.
that's where we get into our funeral rites, which there are so many different traditions when it comes to burials and
Hmm.
funerals. um, Wakes, celebrations of life, legacy preservation, where, something is passed down,
Hmm.
inheritance or heirlooms
Hmm.
or wisdom. Yeah, so those are
Okay.
like kind of a broad overview of like this whole idea of what rites of passage could be.
So those are some of the secular rites of passages that you've talked about, the different things that kind of are universal across everything. What are some rites of passage we have as pagans or those who follow an alternative spiritual path?
Witchy rites of passage,
Witchy
if
rites
you
of
will.
passage. Exactly.
Um, yeah, because I talked about the over culture,
Hmm.
very common ones that you hear about. But well, so the first one I think about is people who go through a confirmation or an initiation
Hmm.
into a tradition or under a particular teacher. So they have a particular tradition that they want to be a part of or a group that they want to join, and they will commit to learning from them or learning their specific traditions, or
Hmm.
eventually maybe even initiating into, becoming a part of that. So that's like the first one that just pops up in my brain. That's probably one of the first ones I was introduced to
Hmm.
as a pagan.
And
One of
that's
the big
interesting because
ones.
I never did initiation of into a particular faith. So I have the opposite thing. So I've never actually done that particular
Mm-hmm.
one. But I do have when someone handed me a book on magic the first time,
Right.
which got
That
me
aha
studying and
moment.
knowledging. Yeah.
Yep. Like, oh, I forgot that this stuff makes sense, and I didn't know this stuff until,
Hmm.
but now it's bringing up that inner knowing.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Or sparking the inner curiosity into, hey, this is fascinating. What's more? What else can I learn? What's
Or the first time you connect to like a tree spirit or an animal spirit
Mhm.
or a rock or gem spirit, like when you
Mhm.
just really just feel the presence of another living and or, you know, piece of matter, piece of earth, and
Mhm.
you realize that it has an energy all of its own and it can speak to you, or other people's mileage may vary, but
Mhm.
some people have experienced that, like some people being me.
Well, like I said, it's funny because again, for me, I look at it now, but for me it was dragon. Always has been dragon. And it was dragon when I was 5 or 6 years old before I had any concept of magic or spirituality or connection. But I can remember just feeling like I knew dragons were real in my heart, and I knew that there were things about them that they taught me. And it was again as learning as a child through it, but it's that different kind of thing. So yeah, I feel that first moment I can count back into something different,
Mm-hmm.
but not really. I was actually called to deities in the traditional sense until much later in life, but that archetype of dragon was very very early on.
Well, and that can be an initiation and a rite of passage too. I like to call it answering the God phone.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think of like threads of spirit or these ideas, these telephone lines that we have that kind of go up into the collective unconscious and then the spiritual consciousness, collective consciousness. And the God phone will ring for people, and you're just like, I know spirit has a message from me, and it's coming through the flavor of Hecate,
Mm-hmm.
because I just keep seeing keys everywhere or crossroads symbology everywhere, and so sometimes people are like, okay, some spirit or archetype or dragon is calling, and you better pick up that phone because they have a message for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pick up the phone by, I don't know, meditating into to receive the message, or pulling some cards to receive a message, or getting a reading
Mm-hmm.
to see what the message is, if you because a lot of times it's really hard to decipher our own messages or read ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately you have to find someone that can guide you to connect with what it means to you,
Mm-hmm.
so you can understand things like that. But yeah, um that can be an invitation to work with that deity or energy for a while and learn from them, and offer that kind of that flavor of grace into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be an initiation or a rite of passage,
Mm-hmm.
or be like you can dedicate yourself to a spirit or a teacher.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Like I said, in my circumstance, it was not anything that was anything formal or anything else. It just was.
Mm-hmm.
It was just there and it just was. But I do feel
I am
like,
dragon, hear me roar.
yeah. And then suddenly I was going to school where the mascot was the dragon. I was born in the year of the
Oh,
dragon. It
and
just
you're
kept
fiery
repeating. And
Sagittarius.
yeah, that kind of energy, all that, just things just kind of kept accumulating. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, it was always like an ever present, you are there. Not that, hey, here's these things that you have to do or I crown you. Though I do have to say I had a very interesting first spirit journey where I finally met dragon, and it was an amazing, interesting experience. And it was, and again, this is a side topic, I know we do this all the time, but I did my first truly meditative spirit journey, and walked through, met dragon, and I felt them give me wings. And then I felt the timing of the thing ending, and we had gone on such a journey. I'm going, oh my god, I can't get back. And the dragon was like, literally, I just gave you wings. Fly back,
Fly
damn it.
back. I love it. That's hilarious. Because
But
I
there's
once,
different things. But again, that connection to the God phone, connection to spirit can happen at different
yeah.
points in time in different moments. I had another one when I was at Burning Man last year. It was the super moon in August. So it was the
Mm.
double moon, the blue moon, crazy experience. And we were out dancing, and I just was, the moon goddess was like, hello, you need to do some few
Mm.
things. And she was just riding me all night and had some really interesting, amazing connections with people, just sharing her blessing with others. And I was just the conduit
Yeah.
for it. So it's really cool to feel
Doing her
that. And
thing.
I think as pagans we feel that. And again, as non-secular folk, you can also feel that in
Yeah.
different experiences. I think it comes through in a different way when you are not feeling witchy. Because again, there are, again, growing up Catholic, growing up in a religious tradition, there were still moments where I felt like I was being called to do something. It was just being called through a different lens that I could understand at
Mm-hmm.
the time.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. Yep.
So
It was what was available versus what you would have
mhm.
chosen had you
Yeah.
known. Yeah. Same. um so I also wanted to talk about initiations and ordination, and the
Okay.
fact that you can, you said you've never done that with a group, but I also believe that there is merit to self ordination and
Hmm.
self initiations
Hmm.
and solo witchery paths.
Hmm.
We are, of the rebellious nature,
Yes.
where we do kind of push back from the mainstream and do our own thing, and even maybe rebel against the ancient spiritual neo-paganism traditions of the 60s and 70s, because
Right.
some of that stuff was appropriated or
Hmm.
stems from certain not so pleasant
Right.
origins, and we've learned better and know better. So uh I do believe that there is a lot of merit to making a dedication to yourself to be
Mm-hmm.
on your spiritual path
Right.
and to not let anybody be the keeper of those keys other than you,
Mm-hmm.
between you and spirit.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it's fascinating with that idea of learning as walking the solitary path that I have, um, for a number of different reasons. One, that I was hiding who I was for many years, and then also for just not
Broom
having,
closet.
yes, but the not having easily accessible teachers other than through books. But I've always been,
Yeah.
again, I take that as Dragon's influence, is that hoarding of knowledge,
Mm.
as learning. That is the primary way I learn, is through different books. But I tried going, oh, maybe I'm Wiccan because Wiccan sounds cool. Then I would read about going, no, this doesn't quite fit what I want, or maybe I'm this. And just, I've been curious about initiations and other traditions, but
Yeah.
each time I think about it and I'm ready to go, hey, maybe I want to, I get this sudden like wrongness, like, no,
Mm.
you aren't meant to find your own path. You are not meant to follow the traditions of other people. And it's just that weird kind of connection thing, that's my own internal deity speaking to me as I'm
I
pulling
love
through, with not any knocking anyone who follows other traditions. I think there are
it's
some
great for the
amazing
people that it
paths.
works for.
Yes, there,
Yes.
that it's amazing. We have
It's just
friends
not
like
the
Ken on
path
the
that
unnamed path, and others who follow the Black Rose path, which was very intriguing and interesting, and all those other things that sound really
fairy
cool.
has always kind of been
Yeah,
tempting.
it's been very tempting, but it doesn't. When I try to start digging into what that would mean, it's like there are immediate roadblocks put in front of me
Not
every
for
time I
you.
try to dig into a organized path of some sort.
It's funny that you say that because I've only the only initiations and ordinations I have been through are the ones that I have initiated myself.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say I haven't studied under done work with groups, been taught by group leaders, and was pushed towards initiation,
Mm-hmm.
but I resisted because group dynamics, man. That
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna get into the drama of it all, but let's just say that the group itself had a shadow aspect that was probably not, it was best that I didn't, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but I was being pressured into it. And that was immediately like my inner rebel was like, there's something not right here.
Mm-hmm.
You told me that you have to complete steps A, B, and C. And then steps D is the initiation. But now you're telling me that because I'm somewhere stuck in the middle here, you're going to just like waive all of these requirements and just initiate me anyway. And then I was like, no, we're not going to cheat something like that because that's a
Mm-hmm.
big commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I walked away. I ended up walking away from that group, and I'm not sorry about it because I kind of look back and I'm like, yeah, they were kind of culty.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anybody left the group, you kind of weren't supposed to or allowed to talk to them and be friends with them anymore. And I was really young, just
Mm-hmm.
so you
Oh yeah.
know.
Oh yeah.
Learn. This is how I learned better.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I left, anybody who was still part of the group wouldn't talk to me or have anything to do with me. But and you know you've left a cult when after you leave, all of the people who left before you are there to like kind of you can reconnect with them and you talk to
Mm-hmm.
them and we unpack like the trauma of it all and we're like, oh my god, that was a cult.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the pressuring people into making commitment because like I think for me, spiritual work is about attuning and aligning with my higher self and
Mm-hmm.
not letting anybody take that power away from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I am much like you in the sense that I kind of resisted getting roped into somebody's their own take or
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint and continuing on the path that feels right for me, whatever that ends up
Mm-hmm.
looking like, and definitely drawing from and learning from all kinds of different traditions and
Mm-hmm.
teachers and
Yes.
poets and authors and speakers. But I'm a seeker of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual wisdom. I do not commit to one path.
Yeah.
That's not who I was born to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's all
No,
that stuff in Gemini.
Nope.
So yeah. So yes, self initiation,
Mm-hmm.
heckin' valid if you ask me.
Makes sense to me. I mean, and even with the thing is walking the solo paths, as we both have, we've still come together.
Oh
with other
yeah.
people who are on different traditions to create our own rituals. I think of the
Yeah.
youth rituals we would do at Pantheacon, and even just other connection rituals we've done as smaller groups. And it's
Yeah.
really fun because, at least, and interesting to me, because we are all walking separate paths, but we are walking them in tandem. And our paths are each different, but we're together as we're doing it, and we can share that same energy. So that kind of communal worship aspect is really interesting, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you knowing you don't have to all be of the same path to do it. And I
Right.
think that's a unique, interesting, I don't know if it's a rite of passage, but it's a realization that you have that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be all this one
Formal.
way.
Although there's something to be said about, and I think this came up in a previous episode, but like having to understand the rules in order to break them. So
Yes.
like I'm grateful for all I learned through that group, through other
Mm-hmm.
traditions, for taking all the formal steps for a ritual and everything, so that I can also now half-ass rituals. But I don't really half-ass. It's just that
Mm-mm.
I don't do it the methodical way that some people would do it. I just
Right.
do it, so often I just have enough witchy friends on my vibration and my
Mm-hmm.
frequency that wants to say, "Hey, you want to do something for this full moon? Hey, do you want to do something for Imbolc? Hey, do you want to continue this tradition that we have?
Mm-hmm.
And let's get together and do this thing." And I don't need a commitment. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need, we just need to do it and get together. But like, it doesn't mean like you are now committed to me for 13 moons in a day. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
No
yeah.
blood bonding, life cycles.
Right. Yeah. Nothing that you saw in The Craft in the
Exactly.
90s. So I just aged myself a little bit. My wife, side note, had never seen that movie. And yes, and I'm like, I'm going to give you the inner teenage experience that you missed out on, and we watched it together. So yeah,
Good.
that was fun. That was
That
that was a blast from my past, tell you what.
yes, that one, and my partner watched Practical Magic a few years ago for the same reason.
I haven't seen that one since it came out, like since years and years ago. So I was like, I kind of want to rewatch it now that I'm older because I think I might appreciate it more. Yeah.
I see myself as Sally so much in that movie.
And I don't
My
even know the
journey and everything else. So
characters, so I'll have to go watch now and
Sandra
see.
Bullock's character, yeah,
Oh, okay.
in there. But yeah, it's good. Anyway, again, tangent. Back to what we were talking about.
Rites of passage.
Okay, so we've talked about secular,
Mm-hmm.
global rites of passage
Mm-hmm.
as humans in this in the U.S. culture, basically. We've talked about pagan rites of passage. Well, let's talk about queer rites of passage. What are
Yes.
some of those things as queer folk that we go through? Similar types of experiences that can be
Mm-hmm.
considered a rite of passage as a queer person.
Shared experiences that,
Hmm.
a lot of queer people can relate to. Not all necessarily, everybody's
Right.
mileage varies, but so I kind of went on a tangent thinking about what a queer person's rite of passage would be, and I kind of made a little bit of a list. But
Okay.
the first one I thought about maybe for my childhood, but I know a lot of other people go through this as a child, especially if you were queer and didn't know it, or did know it but didn't know how to express it, or
Hmm.
knew how to express it but was told to suppress it, and that's bullying.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, in this culture, in this day and age, a lot of the first queer rite of passage as a child is to survive bullying by
Hmm.
peers, family, friends,
Those of us who felt outside.
othered.
Hmm.
Yeah, I it could have been the neurospicy brain that I didn't know about back then, but I had such a hard time making friends until I was a little older.
Hmm.
I just I was painstakingly shy. I really didn't talk a lot, and it was so hard. So I didn't like develop socially at the same rate as my peers.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I got bullied a lot for that. But the
Hmm.
thing is that I learned in therapy is that school was not the only place I was bullied.
Right.
Yay. I was primed for it because it happens at home. It happened at home a lot. So
Hmm.
not to trauma bond on the YouTube too terribly much. But yeah, so unfortunately, a queer rite of passage is learning to be yourself, um, when fitting in is so important, and you know that you
Hmm.
don't.
Right.
Finding your authentic self, or learning to recognize things about yourself and not having to conform, not
Mm-hmm.
having to fit in, but just being like, sorry, this is who I, you're not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. We're not sorry. We're
Mm-hmm.
not making ourselves an apology, but like,
Right.
I am not going to change who I am to make you comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I am human. This is me. I think that's kind of a rite of passage that I feel like our youth is accessing at a
Mm-hmm.
younger age than
Yes.
people of my generation did,
Mm-hmm.
which gives
I
me so
agree.
much hope.
So much hope. And I think there's levels of that one, because I can think of points in time where as 18 19 I was doing that. Hey, I'm recognizing I don't want to do this thing. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be myself, while at the same time suppressing a whole big portion of myself. So it's, for me, it's those incremental steps of coming out in its own way and finding your authentic self in its own way, and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that, hey, I'm going to be me, but okay, I'm going to be this little portion of me that's coming out before, so the next portion can be bigger, etc. And that can take
Yeah.
decades.
Yeah. Um, that's growth.
Hmm.
Along that lines, I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but one of the rites of passages I feel a lot of queer people have to go through, not all, but is battling through the shame game,
Hmm.
or getting past the societal or familial or religious
Hmm.
norms that you were brought up, that you know that
Right.
you don't really, mm, not my thing. But then you feel ashamed of for being ashamed of yourself, or you were
Hmm.
taught to be ashamed of yourself, and not everybody was, but a lot of people are.
Hmm.
And being able to recognize that was taught, it was something that you learned, and things is not inherent in you. You weren't born with this shame,
Hmm.
and if you learned it, you can unlearn it, and you can recognize that that's somebody else's baggage and
Hmm.
not yours to carry. And I do
Right.
feel like there's a lot of queer people that have to go through that rite of passage.
I think that what goes hand in hand with shame is also guilt. I think they're two
Yeah.
sides to the same coin, because there's the shame, you're being shamed for doing something, then you're feeling guilty for doing it anyway,
I,
because
I,
that's who you are, because you
I
can't
remember
resist change.
hearing the difference between shame and guilt explained, and I think shame was that feeling of I am bad or wrong for being this way, and guilt is I feel bad or wrong for doing this thing or making these
Hmm.
choices. So I don't know if they're the same coin so much, but I do think that guilt has a power all of its own, that also, how many queer people don't want kids and are guilted for that, or feel guilty that they're not providing their parents the grandbabies they always wanted, or
Hmm.
whatever. I roll. I don't feel like anybody should ever be obligated to breed, but at the same
But
time,
yeah.
if they want to, they should
Hmm.
be able to, and not
Hmm.
have that also gatekeeping with that. But that that's a
Right.
whole other ramble.
I think the biggest thing that is communal to all queer folk is that idea of coming out. At
100%.
some 100%, that's almost a universal. If you're a queer person who has come out, you've had that experience of coming out.
Yeah, that is
um
100% a very common queer rite of passage. And honestly, it's entirely possible that not all our listeners have gone through that one
mhm,
yet, you know? And if you haven't, that's okay.
mhm.
You will
And then
blossom in your own time, and it's a process. And I know that rejection is really scary and
mhm,
a very real possibility. And if I had anything to say to, my inner youth, or any
mhm,
youth out there, is that yes, in life we're all going to experience rejection, and maybe because at the core somebody can't accept who we are in our authenticity. Um, but in turn, you will, stepping into your authenticity,
mhm,
you will find your way to so much found family,
mhm,
found friends, found relationships that are healthy and rewarding and accepting and affirming.
mhm. And remember, you can come out to yourself as well in that first step. You don't have to come
Yeah.
out to anyone else, but coming out and acknowledging it for
Mm,
yourself is
that's
that
so
first step.
powerful.
Mm-hmm. Of
That's a big.
recognizing, hey, I maybe not be who everyone else thinks I am, or I may not
Yeah.
be this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledging it and allowing yourself the space to be who you are.
I love that so much. So after coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and you are looking to connect, one rite of passage I feel is like queer coding yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does it mean to be visibly queer? What does it mean to take up space in a
Mm-hmm.
world where a lot of the culture is anti the idea of you? What does it mean to have the courage to dress in a way? Which way would you dress? To
Mm-hmm.
kind of signal to the other peacocks in the room. Are you a friend of Dorothy's?
Honestly, it's really funny as we're talking about this right now with being visibly and vulnerably queer. You definitely have much more of that persona right now, whereas I am fully in cozy witch mode. So I'm comfortable, and I my makeup is minor, my
Oh,
hair is like whatever, and my only real uh coding for queerness is my pride
there's
flag
your
in the back
card.
room, and my witchiness is my hierophant card. So I know that right now theoretically I could pass as straight, I could pass as everything else, and or something else of these stereotypical normie, whatever that may be, even though knowing inherently I am not. um if you look closely, you'll see my nerd popping out with my Doctor Who over here. I have all my Agent Carters up over here and my villains poster, but still, it's very
I
interesting
just
to
got my
see that we
drag
think
on
of
today.
we think of these ideas of what we assume is queer, but
Mm-hmm.
what that assumption is not always necessarily what it actually is.
Oh, 100%. Again, we also used to have once talked about is it an archetype or a stereotype sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, what does it even mean to dress queer or
Mm-hmm.
signal queer? Some people it's a hanky signal.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the history of queerness, people had to be a lot more subtle or DL.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always legal.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that people who dress in a way that is rebellious towards gender norms to
Mm-hmm.
me is queer coded. Androgyny can be queer coded for me,
Yes.
and also like yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pasty. The fun colored hair,
Mm-hmm.
the exuberant draggy makeups, but so much of queer culture is also getting appropriated into mainstream that is it even queer
Mm-hmm.
coded anymore?
I
But I
know.
also do believe in saying, and if you can be a voice and a face and humanize
Mm-hmm.
yourself to the world and say, I am a queer person, I am here, I exist,
Mm-hmm.
and all those who are as well are allowed and invited to live and exist and be a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
um I feel like it is a vulnerable position to put yourself in, and it does take a courage, but it's like shining a lighthouse
Mm-hmm.
for the inner child in us and all those who struggle similarly to feel safe to be
Mm-hmm.
themselves. So I
Yeah.
feel like putting myself out there visibly queer, going out
Mm-hmm.
with my queer family that's obviously very queer,
Mm-hmm.
unashamed and loud and proud. And I don't always feel safe doing it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful to have the privilege to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And I want that for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. I love going out with my partner when she is fully able to express herself and be herself, or
Bananas.
in cosplay and everything. It's really amazing to be out there. And again, it's just, this is who I'm with. This is who I love. It doesn't matter what it may be. And I do love and I appreciate that. And again, I want to be even that subtle variant, a sudden subtle subversion, if nothing
Mm-hmm.
else, because now I work primarily from home. As you can see from the office I'm in, even when my background is blurred, you're not going to blur the pride flag. you're still going to see what it is. So even in formal meetings, informal
Mm-hmm.
giving presentations to people across the state, as is part of my job, there is always something that is, my queer flag is out, it's there as that kind of subversive note saying, hey, you are here, you are safe, and I'm not going to be ashamed of who I
Mm-hmm.
am, even though I may not look like what you think a gay person or a queer person should look
Yep.
like.
Because we're just all human and we look like
Exactly.
all kinds of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I think I've talked about, at least I think I've talked to you about it before. I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast before, but there are gay farmers that I follow on TikTok and I love
Yes.
them so much because you just don't think about like the queers being farmers
Mm-hmm.
just because the way like the political landscape looks these
Mm-hmm.
days. But they're like the most delightful humans and they
Yes,
share
I've
their
started
farm
following
animals.
them.
I know. The trans duck.
The trans duck.
I
Oh my
mean,
God.
the trans goth duck is just everything. Yes.
Everything.
I'm so glad I roped you into that one.
Yes, I'm very grateful. And I'm glad the
Other
same thing, like the drag queen I talked about before, same thing with that idea of drag queens shouldn't have mustaches, or they should be overtly femme, or they should be internal and in dark shady clubs, not out
mm-hmm.
in nature. And I love that
Yes.
kind of that playing with the observant
Patagonia.
Patagonia. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love her. Yes. Yep. All of that. Speaking of drag, your first time in drag is
Mm-hmm.
a queer rite of passage.
Oh yeah.
Or your first time dressing in a way that queers the gender, that in a way that that affirms your gender identity in a way
Mm-hmm.
you've always wanted to. Like that's a rite of passage,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Your first time at a gay bar or a pride event.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge, I think, rite of passage where you walk in and you're like, I'm not alone. I found my people. I have community.
Mm-hmm.
That's very liberating.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
So I think of all of those things as queer rites of passage.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to say is a lot of our queer ancestors were taken too soon
Mm-hmm.
due to the AIDS pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be listening to the voices of the queer elders that we do have.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be learning the history. And as some of us, I don't know who, but some of us age into becoming the queer elders, start mentoring the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, getting people under your wing, empowering ourselves and others to be themselves, uh, not letting our history be swept under the rug,
Mm-hmm.
preserving the legacies of those we still have, while they still have a voice to teach us of the things that we didn't learn. I feel like that's the right to eldership,
Mm-hmm.
queer rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
I
I
agree.
think that rites of passage are a very powerful magic, and I think that everybody kind of experiences them either by witnessing them or being a part of them, and there are ones that you can volunteer to create and be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've written I don't know how many customized wedding or commitment ceremonies for people because they're secular or they're non-traditional or they want it customized for whatever their needs
Mm-hmm.
are. So choosing to create a rite of passage for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
um, choosing to let your friends create a rite of passage for you.
I love it.
Yeah, get out there and get creative with this with the concept of a rite of passage.
Yes.
This is a new year. We got new vibes.
Mm-hmm.
We're on a whole other rung of the spiral of life that we're living,
Yes.
and yeah, think about what rites of passages you've experienced, what rites of passages you are interested in experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and how you would go about that, and who would you include. So with that said, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project. If you liked this topic or have a topic you would like to suggest, just make sure you give us a thumbs up, send us a comment, share with us your thoughts and what kind of rites of passages you've been involved in.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to contact us, you can contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle at Queer Witch Project. We upload almost every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.